very happy with us this morning, but we we have managed to get through it. So thank you everyone for joining us for our seventh virtual Lupus Health Conference of 2024. And I'm Lori Day. I'm the Communications Manager of the Lupus Foundation of Northern California. We're very excited to welcome you to this special holiday conference. And we'd like to say a special thank you to GSK for being the sponsor for today's health conference. We have two great sessions planned. First, we'll be welcoming Sarah Goozee, and she'll be discussing how to handle holiday stress. And then we'll have Tanya Freilich talking about some food options. But we're also, just so you know, we have one last health conference planned for 2024. It's a special one because we're co-presenting it with the Lupus Foundation of Southern California. It will be on December 7th, and we'll be hearing from Army Grammer and Martin Schneider, and they'll be talking about a new test for lupus patients and then the value of your medical information. So I think they're both going to be great presentations for lupus patients to hear. So be sure to sign up. You can find it on our website or on our social media. Also, just one last quick note is we have two special fundraisers that we're doing this year. One is with See's Candy, where you can order See's Candy for friends, hostess gifts for the holidays. That's on our website. And they start shipping on November 11th, and sales are through December 6th. And then we'll be at Kendra Scott in Santana Row on December 8th. And 20% of all proceeds from that day will go to us. So start your holiday shopping early. So last thing is we always send out a survey at the end of the health conference, and we would love you to take that so we know how you liked the conference, as well as if you have any ideas for new topics. Thank you. And now I'm going to introduce you to Krista.
Thank you, Lori, and good morning. My name is Krista, and I am a lupus patient and volunteer with the Lupus Foundation of Northern California. I'm excited to be your moderator for this morning's session. So now I will go over the agenda real quick, and then we will get started. The first hour, we are excited to hear from Sarah Goozee as she discusses how to manage your stress during the holiday season. After her presentation, we will have 15 minutes of live question and answer. We will be moderating the questions, so you can type your question whenever you want during the presentation. Our second session will be from a nutritionist and lupus patient, Tanya Freilich, which she will be discussing winter wellness, fuel your body with festive foods. I am pleased to introduce our first keynote speaker, Dr. Sarah S. Goozee. She is a clinical psychologist and director of wellness at IPM Medical Group, where she manages programs to serve patients living with chronic pain. She obtained her PhD in clinical psychology with an emphasis in health psychology at San Francisco's Alien International University. She also worked in higher education for years as a psychology professor and dean of academic affairs. Dr. Goozee developed the Lupus Activity Scale, LAS, a self-report measure that empowers patients and quantifies lupus disease activity. She continues to work in the field of psychological research, clinical work, and teaching higher education. Dr. Goozee is a passionate lupus advocate and a former board member of the Lupus Foundation of Northern California. She resides in the East Bay with her husband, Rob Mayeda, and their twin boys, Chris and Johnny. In her spare time, she enjoys chasing her children in an effort to prevent them from hurting themselves. Before we start, I want to remind you, if you have a question, you can type it in the Q&A area at any time, and we'll ask them after the presentation. We are thrilled to have Dr. Goozee here to talk to us today. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. I'm honored to be here, and My apologies for the technical difficulties. How appropriate. I am doing a presentation on stress management, and the universe decided to give me an opportunity to practice it. So I am going ahead and share my screen. I have a PowerPoint prepared for you here. And I am happy to share that later if participants are interested. We can share that. Additionally, I will be looking in the chat for any questions that you might have, and I'll allow some time at the end so that I could go over that as well. All right. So thank you again for having me. So as it was shared, I have been a member of the board for the Lupus Foundation for years. My family, including my husband, my brother, and I have all been former board members, and it's been about, I think, 18 years now. So lupus is a cause near and dear to my heart. Treating individuals with chronic pain is also near and dear to my heart. And what a great opportunity to have these conferences and a great time to be reminded of what we can do to get through the holidays and actually enjoy them. I really want individuals to thrive instead of just survive. So let me go ahead and make this full screen. Hopefully the font isn't too small. All right, so holiday harmony. Let's start by talking about what is stress. Not that any of us have ever experienced it. Maybe you can sense my sarcasm there. So stress is a feeling of an emotional and or physical tension, and it can come from any event. Now, oftentimes when people think about like stress, they think of like finances and work and life demands. The truth of the matter is our body has a stress system originally designed for life-threatening stressors, such as, oh, I don't know, a wild tiger. Not necessarily a major threat in most suburbs nowadays. However, your body will physically react to other items, such as an unexpected bill in the mailbox, with the same amplitude. For some individuals, it can be just as stressful as a wild animal jumping out at them. So that is to say, your body is perceiving a stressful event. And sometimes in that moment, it's really hard to reason with your body, where it feels like that item is life-threatening. And so this is where we're going to talk about what are some of the things that you can do to help your body regulate itself, not go into that sympathetic nervous system, which is automatically triggered by your amygdala in your brain. And your amygdala has good intentions, but it hits the panic button a little too fast sometimes. And so stress is your body trying to react to it. And it is common to have stress. So let me just go ahead and normalize some of it. It is absolutely normal to have some stress. And actually, sometimes a little bit of stress performance can actually enhance how you do. So for example, if you're taking an exam and you're a little stressed about it, you're much more likely to be mindful of time, double check your questions, right? You're more likely to have studied really well the night before, gotten more sleep, had a good healthy breakfast. If you're relaxed and you're like, oh, it's not a big deal, I don't really need to worry about this, you're more likely to make common mistakes or maybe even forget putting your name on the entire exam. So a little bit of stress can help and enhance performance. Now, stress can happen frequently for some individuals, and some individuals can even have significant and severe stress. There was this great study that came out of, I believe it was Johns Hopkins, about they've been actually like 5 years old now, where they took a look at stress levels and heart disease and just overall quality of life of individuals who had very stressful professions. So we're talking, first responders in high crime areas. They also included a lot of physicians that were treating terminal conditions of children. So talk about stressful. And what they found is that when they take a look at that versus the average population of various, occupations, it wasn't that those individuals always had, higher cortisol, adrenal fatigue, all sorts of, type 2 diabetes and heart disease and disease activity. what they found is actually the individuals who were able to stay in the field for longer periods of time had really good resiliency skills. They were really good about, being mindful of getting exercise, getting enough sleep, doing things on their time off, and really holding that time off and respecting it, and doing things that brought them joy and encourage endorphins and other feel-good hormones. And I'm going to get more into that. So just something to kind of keep in mind is that, it is quite common. It happens to everyone. The key thing is how you respond to it. And stress can come from a lot of different sources, right? Work often comes to mind for a lot of individuals, but family can also be stressful. Illnesses, of course, can be very unpleasant and very stressful, or an illness of a loved one, not to mention just daily activities, the demands of whether it be things like picking up the kids, get to the doctor's appointment, don't forget to do your lab work. Did you call the plumber about the leak? And don't forget that the engine light just turned on this morning. So all sorts of those things can accumulate and it can add up. But I also want to point out, we can even have a stress response to positive events, right? How do you feel the day before you're hosting a major event, right? Or the day before a vacation? Right? A lot of times individuals think, oh, I'll have fun and I'll enjoy it once I'm actually there or towards the end of it, which is really kind of, unfortunate. Sometimes we're so stressed out about it and the planning and everything that goes into it that we don't get to have that moment and to really enjoy it. And so those are some of the things I kind of want to talk about because we want to cope through it and not white knuckle it. Not exactly ideal. So what happens when you experience stress? So a few things. One, your body loves a rhythm. All right. And I'm sure many of you have noticed that if you travel internationally, you might notice, oh, the jet lag, your body loves a rhythm. And it doesn't care if it's dark or light outside. Your body's like, no, our rhythm is this. We wake up at this time. And it can take a while to kind of set it. And so your body also has a rhythm of when it produces certain hormones like melatonin at night, right? Food, hunger-inducing hormones during the day at certain periods of time. And so those hormones all, I always think of them kind of like dominoes, right? When one hormone gets thrown off, it starts throwing off the rest of the hormones. And so it's important that we take account of what are the things we can control. And some of it is your stress level, because that can also impact your hormones, which we know increases lupus disease activity. But I also want to point out, it also increases lots of other disease activities, a lot of autoimmunes. And I know that 30 to 40% of individuals with lupus have another autoimmune, such as rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, fibromyalgia, all sorts of conditions. And so the important thing to note is if you're going to start to go into the stress response and your hormones get thrown off, your entire system gets disrupted. And then your body thinks it's helping you because it's perceiving a stressor, such as an unexpected bill, maybe not a tiger, maybe, who knows? But usually it's some sort of threat. And what happens is your body goes into the sympathetic nervous system, commonly referred to as the fight or flight response. Your body's going to get ready to either attack your threat or to run away from your threat. And so that's one of the reasons why your body then starts pumping more adrenaline and cortisol, because it thinks you need to increase the function of some key organs, such as your heart and your lungs, because you're going to need those to run and to fight. However, what it also does is it also turns down sending blood and energy to other organs that in that moment, if you're running for your life, you probably don't need. And so a lot of times what we find is that individuals will tell me things like, you know what, my period gets thrown off, my cycle is thrown off, my sleep is lousy, we're having infertility issues. Because when you're in chronic stress, remember, your body is focused on your heart and your lungs and your muscles getting tight for that fight or flight. It is not going to worry about whether or not you digested your sandwich well. And instead, you end up with some acid reflux. Not fun, right? And so those are some of the things to kind of keep in mind of why does my body do that? It thinks it's helping you, all right? Keep in mind, I'm standing in front of my mailbox reading an unexpected bill, right? And my body is going to go into fight or flight response. I'm not in a fight with this envelope, by the way, right? But my body doesn't know that, and it's going to start triggering this. And then lastly, hopefully you resolve this stressor, right? I remind my body this is not a threat to my life. Let me call them. Let me see what this bill is about. Let me see if we can do a payment plan, right? Maybe it was already included and maybe it's an administrative error. Let me see what we can do. As I start to do that, my body wants to come back to the parasympathetic nervous system. And that is where you have nice, deep abdominal breaths. Your hormones are being regulated. Your muscles are soft and relaxed. Okay. So a few things here I love this image about all the effects of the human body, because oftentimes individuals think of, one or two key symptoms for them. And I want to point out a few things. When it comes to stress, it does not discriminate. It will impact all of your systems in your entire body. So oftentimes I'll have individuals being referred to me from various specialties. I love to share this story. I had a patient years ago. At this point, I think like it was a decade ago. She got referred to me from dermatology. Keep in mind, right? I'm a psychologist and I work in a major chronic pain clinic. And I was like, dermatology, I wonder if she has some kind of painful skin condition. Nope. I was curious. I was like, what's going on? I was looking at her chart. And as I was speaking to her, she shared with me that she had struggled with hives for years and various just skin irritations. Doctors had thrown every ointment and cream and steroids that they could at her. She had tried all sorts of concoctions and lotions and things like that. And within speaking to her and getting to know her, the doctor had also noticed this pattern, I think, over time as they were treating her. She unfortunately was a widow and she had lost an adult child. And so as you can imagine, that amount of heavy grief and sadness and stress in her body. And she tried to be so diplomatic about it and hold herself with grace, but it had a heavy toll on her and her body was stressed. She was isolated and lonely. She wasn't as physically active, right? And so her body was under tremendous stress. And what they found is that as we were working together and, her and I were doing therapy and grief work, and I was helping her with some other aches and pains that she had, sure enough, her skin cleared up. No more ointments, no more creams, no steroids. Didn't even need them. And so the reason I share that story is people were like surprised, like, oh, we got a referral from a dermatologist. And I was, yeah, and it was a pleasant surprise. And I was so pleased to see that her doctor was thinking about what else is going on in your body instead of just thinking, oh, it's a detergent, it's a food you ate, They went through that, but they realized what else plays a major role? Your stress. And so all sorts of things can happen. So an example for your skin, things that we see include hair loss, right? Not fun. Acne, and acne can get a lot worse. People break out in hives when they're stressed. Things that I see for the brain include headaches. Of course, we're all familiar with tension headaches, but individuals who also have migraines, and they might have a family history of that, it's going to be triggered. The severity and the frequency can often be a lot worse. A couple of the things that, of course, come up is your breathing. I'll have patients with asthma, and they'll tell me, oh, I've had it since I was a kid, and I'm really, allergic to a lot of the pollen, and that triggers it. But when they have stress, they're like, it's constant. And so if you have an underlying condition and then you add stress to it, it's going to make things even worse, such as the case with, right, things like lupus, multiple sclerosis, or diabetes. A few other things that come up is your entire GI system essentially gets neglected. And so what we see is a lot of times patients will have increases in IBS, GERD, all sorts of gastric issues, bloated, nausea, diarrhea, constipation. It can go in either direction, and it can go both. It makes it, right, too stimulated or not enough. And so that is not pleasant. And the last thing we want is to add insult to injury when you're already going through a stressful time. And so your body, like I shared earlier, when it thinks you're in fight or flight mode, it is going to neglect some systems, and your GI is one that it neglects. The other one that it tends to neglect is your reproductive organs. And we see this in both men and women. I want to point that out. Truth of the matter is women are more likely to discuss it, and I think it's because it's more visible. They'll notice their period being off. They'll notice the symptoms of, you know, whether it be breast tenderness or mood swings. It can impact men. We see that with sperm count, mobility, and even sperm shape. And so that is, you know, important to keep in mind. And oftentimes you even hear about these like celebrities who are trying really hard to have kids, and they're having a tough time, they're going through infertility, and then they adopt. And then suddenly, guess what? Surprise, they're pregnant, because now they're not as stressed out trying to get pregnant. And when you take away the stress, the body loves to go back into that homeostasis, and surprise, you get a little baby. All right. Doesn't always work out that way, but there is a common occurrence, which is one of the reasons why acupuncture and other types of stress relaxation techniques are commonly utilized in infertility. A couple other things that come up is your circulation. You might notice that when you're really stressed out, your circulation is thrown off. I'll have individuals tell me, I get really hot and sweaty. I get others that tell me they'll get the chills. Your fingertips, your nose, and your toes often will get cold, because your body is focusing all the concentration of blood to your major organs. And so it wants to help you in the event that, again, you're going to fight or flight. And that does include also sending a lot of it to your major muscle groups, right? So I'll have individuals tell me my back gets really tight, my hamstrings, my arms, my neck. I carry a lot of tension in my neck. That's very common. Something to keep in mind next time you're stressed: pay attention to where your shoulders are. They should never be friends with your ears. But what happens when we're stressed is we tend to do this, and it's an unconscious response. It's actually because our shoulders are more likely to go up when we're stressed, because we're protecting our jugular and we're protecting our neck. Isn't that something, right? Again, that unexpected bill is not going to jump out and slash my neck. The tiger might, though. The tiger might. And so that's why we do this when we're, you know, feeling a stress response. So those are some things to kind of keep in mind, is how are you holding it in your body? And I love to show this because I think of this diagram as essentially your body's dashboard. If your body were a car and new lights were to turn on, you would probably pay attention to it, right? The last thing you want is to start your car one morning when you're rushing to get to appointments and get to important events, and to have it light up like a Christmas tree. Yet, oftentimes I'll work with individuals, and especially individuals with lupus, who have so many, you know, various symptoms, and, you know, they tend to know they're kind of their own dashboards. But sometimes they'll tell me, you know what, there was a new symptom and I probably should have said something sooner, right? And so I encourage you, if you wouldn't do it to your car, don't do it to your body. Now, there are some things where you might tell me, yeah, the tire pressure sensor kind of goes off occasionally in my body. I know that one kind of flares up. And when it flares up a little too much, I know I need to be better about getting enough sleep. And, you know, I message my rheumatologist, and I get better about, you know, doing some meditation, whatever it might be. Consider that your body's warning system, right? Let's not wait until the whole dashboard is lit up. All right. So here's another list of some of the symptoms of stress that I discussed. A few things that are also included is interrupted sleep. And this is interesting. Majority of the time, my patients will tell me they have a version of insomnia, hard onset of sleep, or they wake up prematurely, or it's broken sleep throughout the night. But I do get some patients that when they're really stressed out, they actually will experience hypersomnia, where they'll sleep even more and they're so tired. And that's because the sleep really isn't that restful. So that's also interesting to note. We see mood changes, irritability, worrying, anxiety. And then, of course, we see physical pain. And this is something that's important to note. Even if an individual didn't have lupus, and I have a person who has no other medical conditions going on, and they're going through a tough, stressful time, it is not uncommon for them to start reporting some aches and pains and muscle spasms and cramps and all sorts of things. Stress is painful. Now, when you do have some underlying chronic pain conditions, it makes it even worse. And that's the last thing we want. And so it's really important to make sure that you stay ahead of that stress. And the physical pain isn't just limited to the body. It can also present as headaches, as we talked about earlier. And then we see also stomach upset, increase of blood pressure, of course, and changes in the appetite. And it's interesting. If you have very severe acute stress, it's going to be a reduction in your appetite. When it's chronic, for some people, it can actually be an increase of appetite. And the increase of appetite is so interesting. What a lot of my patients will share with me is they are looking for comfort foods. When they are very stressed, they are looking. And then when I ask individuals, I'm like, well, what's your comfort food? Not that I'm trying to get ideas, although, that doesn't hurt. But I'm usually asked, what is your comfort food? And I usually hear carbs, things like, I love, ice cream. I love cakes. I have a sweet tooth. Any kind of cookie or chocolate around is not safe, right? I get some individuals who will tell me, I like salty carbs. Give me a big bowl of fettuccine Alfredo, mashed potatoes, ooh, French fries, right? Carbs, carbs, carbs. There's actually a reason. Carbs will actually temporarily boost your serotonin, which is your feel-good, happy hormone. And so essentially, your body's self-medicating. It's like, I don't like this chronic stress. I want to feel better. I need a little bit of relief. Ooh, that food sounds good. I feel better after I have it. And so have you ever noticed after having a lot of carbs, two things, a little happier and you're sleepy. And a lot of times around Thanksgiving, everybody tells me, oh, it's a tryptophan in the turkey. And actually research shows it's the carbs. So it's the mashed potatoes actually that are making you want to take a nap more than the turkey. Although the tryptophan does indeed play a role, carbs will give you that little sugar spike and then a bit of a crash, right? And then unfortunately, that's when we go for a second slice of, right, cheesecake or pie. Okay. Anyways, a couple other things to keep in mind is the problems with the skin that we talked about. And I see that with a lot with my lupus patients where they'll tell me their rashes or their photosensitivity is worse when they're stressed out. Chest pain. I will tell you, if you've never had chest pain, go get it ruled out. Let's get peace of mind and make sure it's nothing serious. Majority of the time, my patients will tell me, no, I know what this is. It's the normal tightness that I get. My heart rate goes up. I take a couple deep breaths and it goes away. And so we want to be mindful of that. And then, of course, your disease activity, you get sick more often. So not only does your lupus disease activity increases, but you're more likely to get sick. If you've ever noticed this pattern, I encourage you to pay attention to it. A lot of individuals get sick right after the holidays. Is it because you were traveling and around a lot of people? Possibly. Was it also because you were hosting and busy cooking for 3 days up to the event and getting last minute Christmas gifts and up late at night wrapping the presents and didn't get enough sleep? Probably. So something to keep in mind is that after a very stressful event, your immune system tries to help you with the fight or flight, and it goes and increases your immune system. But as soon as you start to return back to homeostasis, it does this little bit of a dip. And whatever virus, bacteria your body was fighting during those stressful days is exhausted. And now they slip in quietly, right? So just some things to kind of keep in mind. We don't want to feel crummy after that. So why is stress management so important? You've heard me say it before. I'll say it again. It's worth repeating. It helps decrease lupus disease activity. As it was shared in my intro, when I was getting my doctorate, sadly, many years ago, I wanted to take a look at what were the biggest variables. And what I found at the time was there wasn't a lot of instruments that measure disease activity. And that's why I went and developed my own. But what I did find in my research of limited information at the time was that stress was one of the biggest factors. Now, you can't run off to Tahiti and just be like, all right, stress-free, because I assure you there is still stress in Tahiti. It doesn't matter where you go, what spa, right? Where you try to hide stress. Remember, it can be a good thing, and stress can be even something minor. It all has to do with how your body perceives it. So what else do we need to be mindful of? The mental health impact. When you are stressed, it has a big impact on your brain hormones. Remember we talked about hormones and being a set of dominoes? Well, they're going to start knocking things over, including our friends, serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine. Don't worry, you don't need to memorize these hormones. They are not on the pop quiz. But these hormones play a big role in helping you feel happier, and calm and at peace. And so it's important because oftentimes there's already underlying factors that can increase the likelihood of feeling agitated and depressed and anxious. It's tough living with a chronic illness. There's no denying that. And that on its own is challenging. Also, it's a disease that has a lot of inflammation, including in the brain, which increases your odds of a depression or anxious reaction. But also, so does stress. And so being mindful of some of these things we can control is so important. We talked about also how it plays a role in your sleep and how important that is. And then, of course, just managing your stress for a better quality of life, so that you're able to complete just even your activities of daily life. And that can be things like, spending time with your loved ones, or cooking a good meal, or just even being independent. And for some individuals, they have to do a lot of modifications in how they do activities for daily life, which is totally fine. But to be able to do those, including the things that you enjoy, to have that greater satisfaction is so important. So let's talk about ways to manage your stress. And so one of the first ones is practice self-care. This comes up so often when I talk to individuals about their stress management. They'll tell me, I don't have time. Because a lot of times when individuals hear self-care, and pop culture, I think, plays a big role in this, where they'll talk about self-care and they make it sound like you have to go to a spa for 2 days and read a bunch of books and soak in some herbs or something, which is great, and you can do that. However, can you do that on a daily basis? Probably not. And so self-care doesn't have to be big gestures. You're welcome to do those. I encourage those. I'm a big fan, by the way. However, just on a day-to-day basis, what are you doing to take care of yourself? Did you eat some fruits and vegetables today? Are you drinking enough water? Did you get some exercise? The exercise does not have to be a 1 hour, boot camp, by the way. It could even be, I went to Costco. That was my exercise. I got like 1,000 steps. And that totally counts. And of course, are you getting enough sleep? And so this is so important, but I gotta tell you, it's probably the first thing we cross off the list when we're feeling stressed. As soon as we start to feel stress, we'd start trimming things of, oh no, I'll just stay up late tonight to get this done. I'm not gonna go to the gym at all this week. That's gonna backfire, right? And so we want to be mindful of that I want these to get a priority. And that leads me to number 2, take time for yourself. Prioritize you. As we go into the holidays, I so often get individuals telling me things like, I've already started making a Christmas list of all the presents. I'm like, that's great. What about a list to take care of yourself, right? Why is it that if I were to ask individuals to show me their calendar, it is probably filled with a lot of doctor's appointments. Some of my patients will show me deadlines and reminders of when bills are due. That sounds fun. Yeah. But I usually don't see anything enjoyable. And I'll ask them, when is there something enjoyable? When do you have, coffee with a girlfriend, or taking the kids to a local park, or walking your dog with your neighbor twice a week, right? Make those a priority. Those aren't the things that you sprinkle into with your free time. I want those to be the foundation, because you deserve it. No one else is going to advocate to take care of you than you. And so that's really important. So I encourage individuals, and I love that we're doing this early in November, although I feel like, the retailers are already making me feel like I'm behind on the holidays. But I love that we're getting ahead of this, because I want you to look at your calendar and look at your to-do list and be mindful of the things that you're going to keep on your list and the things that you are going to remove, right? And your self-care and your, basic function items, such as eating healthy, sleeping, making sure you have time in between appointments to take a break and get some water, things like that, is so important. Okay. I also encourage my patients to allow some cushion time. So do not overschedule, right? There have been times where I've even done it to myself, and I will, get offered a sooner appointment, and I'll look at my schedule and I'm like, that schedule's already pretty tight, but I can make it fit. Man, do I pay for it, right? You want to have a little bit of cushion time, especially in the holidays, right? You've got things like weather to start considering, although those of us in Northern California know we're spoiled. We get some of the best weather around. But, there's going to be days where it's going to be pouring rain or it's really cold and you may not want to run all those errands in one day. And so I encourage people to pace their schedule, take a look at it, try to allow cushion in between so that you're not doing 3 errands, back to back, that are all long and tedious and heavy, right? I do get some individuals who will tell me, I don't drive, I rely on a family member, so we try to do 2 or 3. And I encourage them, I'm like, I get that. And that, kind of gets challenging. Just be mindful of, I don't want you on your feet for too long. I don't want you sitting in a car in traffic for too long either. That's not good for your back and for your legs. And so just being mindful of breaking that up a little bit. And it is okay for you to block time for yourself. And it's so interesting. People will be like, oh, I have an open day. I'm like, but is it open? No, right? You still need to take care of yourself. Give yourself credit for that, right? You ate healthy, maybe did a load of laundry, got some time to read a book, called a dear friend. Those are important too, and you deserve to get credit for those. And now, speaking of friends, setting boundaries is huge. And that's one of the reasons I put this at the beginning of the list, because I wanted to make sure I really emphasize this, especially going into the holidays. If you ever find yourself later on resenting or being upset with yourself that you said yes to something, you are probably guilty of not setting boundaries. And that's okay. I'm not here to shame you or judge you. I am guilty of it myself. What I want you to be aware of is it is acceptable to say no. It really is. And I know for a lot of individuals, based on how you were brought up, maybe your culture, maybe your family dynamics are at play, there's a lot of reasons why it can be really tough. I've even had individuals tell me, I don't want to say no. I want to do all those things. I want to bake 4 dozen cookies last minute for my kids' school. Okay, but is it wise for you to have a pain flare for the next week after you're done baking? Probably not, right? And so how can you say no? So a couple of things, I'd love to always share this with my patients, because saying no can be really hard. One is I encourage you to start by practicing with people who are super close to you, because they are going to be the most understanding. You're going to feel the most comfortable telling them no. And you can even share with them, you know what, I am trying to set some boundaries. Can I practice with you a little bit, right? And being okay to say things like, no, I'm so sorry. I cannot go and pick you up from the airport at 5 p.m., right? Knowing that's a 2-hour drive in traffic, which sounds like so much fun. But also saying no, the word itself is really hard. And so what I have done oftentimes is I'll tell individuals, try using things like, I'm not sure, let me think about it. And then get back to them. Because what you don't want, and I know a lot of people tell me, well, I feel like that's rude. I don't want to be flaky. And that's not what I'm saying. But it gives you time to kind of think about it. So for example, you get invited to a holiday party, but it's an hour and a half away. You're not sure how you're going to feel. You've got an infusion a few days prior, right? And so it's okay to say, I really want to attend. I'm not sure how I feel. I don't know yet, but as we get closer, can I let you know? The people who really matter in your life are going to understand and get it, right? And I understand that sometimes we don't want to go into that level of detail and tell individuals. It's also fine to say, I'm not sure. Let me check and get back to you, and then get back to them. But what it does is it gives you space instead of on that spot, right? If someone were to ask me right now, hey, Sarah, what are you doing in 2 weeks? I'm not sure. To be honest with you, I'm not sure, right? But if you were to ask me and I were like, let me go check my calendar and my kids' calendars, because let's face it, I work for them now. And then I can get back to you and tell you whether or not I'm available. Am I on that side of town? Will I have the energy? What does the rest of my week look like? If I know the rest of my week is going to be slammed at work, I may have to say no, because I need some time to just get caught up at home and to do some cooking and laundry and do my own thing, right? And so it's okay to tell somebody, let me think about it, and then get back to them. It gives you that space instead of right away saying no, which feels uncomfortable, but also so much better than you saying yes and then later on regretting it. And then people have a hard time kind of backing out. So that's something I really encourage you to work on if you struggle with that, is being able to say no. The other one is to ask for or accept help. I see this a lot where individuals will tell me, you know, I was so independent. I put myself through school and I was the strong one in the family. And I take care of my elderly parents as well as my kids. And, you know, and my sister needs my help. And they're doing all of this. And I'll ask them, well, what's going on? You know, are you able to accept some help? Be like, yeah, but they don't do it the way I like it. Okay. Is it, again, is it worth the pain flare? Is it worth your health though, right? Maybe mom doesn't fold the laundry perfectly, but is it worth it? Are the towels being in perfect origami worth it for you, right? And some patients will tell me, yeah, it is actually. But they'll tell me, but I don't care how she cleans the bathroom. And so when I accept help in that regard, right? And so find where you can accept help, right? And also, it's okay to ask for help. Oftentimes, I see individuals who have been pretty independent and high functioning, and then they get ill. And so the family also has come to see them as an individual who's pretty independent and pretty strong. And now there's this challenge of you have to now teach them how to treat you and let them know, hey, I used to be able to go across town every weekend to watch all my nieces and nephews' soccer games. I can't do that anymore. And so just to let them know, right, of I can't always do that. But if there's somebody else and they want to carpool and give me a ride, right, being able to accept help, right, or also asking for it. I oftentimes too will get individuals who tell me I have a limited family, or I don't have a lot of family in this area, and I grew apart from some of my friends in high school, or I'm new to this area. I have a hard time because I don't have a very big social circle yet. And so that's where I might encourage you, right, to increase your social circle, right, whether it be through work and, you know, book clubs and, you know, your synagogue or temple or whatever organization to kind of build up that network. But also sometimes it's okay to outsource it, right? I had a patient I worked with for a few years, and poor thing, unfortunately, had a severe injury. And it was going to be so critical for her function, for her to be able to accept help. And she had the hardest time. And what we were able to do over time, you know, talking about, right, her role of being like the strong mom in the family and things like that, of re-identifying that doesn't necessarily mean that the strong mom is strong because she makes the Christmas feast, right? You can be a still strong mom in character, right? And it's okay if you outsourced who made the ham. It really is, right? Maybe you keep your one or two dishes that you are known for, but go ahead and hire someone, right? Or maybe for the holidays when your family and friends ask, hey, what would you like? You know, she ended up actually telling her husband for their wedding anniversary that she wanted a housekeeper just to come once a month and do all this heavy scrubbing. And it was a big game changer for her because she was still proud of her home and it was able to keep it neat and tidy, but she was able to do that and focus on other things like spending time with her kids as opposed to, right, scrubbing a bathroom, which by the way, there's no good body mechanics to scrubbing a bathroom. Like I don't want individuals to get hurt. And so if you're already especially predisposed. And so in that situation, she was able to outsource it, right? And I know it can be a financial expense. That's one of the reasons why for her, she felt guilty about it. But she was like, you know what? That's better than him buying me a piece of jewelry that I won't necessarily like anyways. So she was able to say that to him. So I encourage you to take a look at that and look at, you know, what can you do to either set a limit with someone, accept help, right? Ask for it yourself or to outsource it. Number 4, healthy socialization. There is no doubt that the importance of a good network around you plays a big key role. There's a study that came out in 2017 that examined what was some of the best predictors of quality of life as we age. And they took a look at things like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, even cancer. And they looked at things that individuals who had low risk or low prevalence of these diseases, what did they do? And so as you can imagine, you saw a lot of the good stuff, such as they didn't smoke, they didn't drink much alcohol or at all. They also were, you know, good about exercise. But something really surprised researchers one of the best predictors was actually their social support. As a matter of fact, having a good circle of friends and family around you plays a bigger role in predicting your quality of life than even obesity. This rocked the medical world, as you can imagine, right? Because there's this big movement about, obesity, which I understand and is indeed very important. However, I thought it was really interesting. And I remember when this came out, I had shared it with my parents and I had shared it with my mother. And she was thrilled with this. She's like, that's fantastic. The next time the doctor tells me to lose 20 pounds, I'm going to remind him I have a lot of friends. So I don't encourage you to say that to your doctor, by the way. I just thought it was funny that my mom would say that. And the reason I'm sharing that with you is it is really important. And so those are some things to kind of keep in mind. And I know socialization can be hard when you're having a pain flare and you're feeling crummy. Sometimes it can be tough to be around people. And the truth of the matter is nowadays with social media and texting and FaceTimes and video calls, there is a way to do it that is safe and still accessible and in small doses too. I often get patients tell me like, oh, I would love to see my family and friends, but I'm just wiped out. Like my energy, I'm just dragging after like an hour visit and finding ways to modify that. And so, if it's a matter of, requesting socialization, and getting together on days and times that work better for you or closer to home, or, even things like joining a group or an organization. There are so many that you can do that are online. You can also connect with individuals in volunteer work, such as, right, the Lupus Foundation, always looking for good volunteers, but also even taking a class. It's a great way, at a community college, go take a class that has to do with a hobby, maybe photography or something, and start making some connections. But also just you being around people has a positive impact. You drinking a cup of coffee at home is much different than you drinking a cup of coffee in a Starbucks around people. When we are around people, our body actually reacts better. Isn't that interesting? We are such social creatures. And so the other thing I like to point out, especially as we go into the holidays, because this comes up a lot, where I'll have individuals tell me, listen, I'm going to see my family, which is great because, I love most of them. But there's a couple relatives that just love to pick at some sensitive topics for me. I get a lot of patients who are really private about their health, and they'll be like, my uncle so-and-so, he's going to ask me, why aren't you working? And he doesn't understand how bad my lupus is. Or I have an aunt who gets too nosy and things like that. And so it's okay for you to be mindful of the conversation topics. All right. I actually encourage people to walk in with a little bit of a plan, right? If someone starts to ask a little too much about a conversation topic that you're not comfortable with, it's okay for you to do one of a few things. One, cut them off and say, that topic isn't up for discussion today. That can be really assertive for some people, and some people, they feel really uncomfortable saying that. Another way is to change the topic. Be like, oh, enough about me. Tell me about you. I heard you got a new dog. That's an easy one. Flip it around on them. People love to talk about themselves. And so if they start to come up at a certain trigger where you're like, I don't talk about that, right? That one's really tough. And sometimes just be kind of nice and be like, you can tell them, I don't feel comfortable talking about that today. I really want to try to keep it light and enjoy the holidays. Can we change the subject? And just let them know, right? So it's okay for you to control the conversation. You don't have to engage in certain topics and things like that. And also, lastly, let certain family members know, like, hey, if you see, Aunt Sue cornering me, please come running over and interrupt us and talk about the dip. All right. And that is totally fine. Something else I encourage too is have some safe topics that you're always happy to talk about. In my family, it's the weather, probably also because my husband's a meteorologist, but you can always talk about the weather, sports, maybe not politics, but find some topics that you feel comfortable with. And I encourage you to keep those in your pocket, so to speak. Okay. Number 5, manage your time. This kind of comes back earlier when we were talking about, the self-care and prioritizing yourself, but this is so important, especially as we go into the holidays, because you have your day-to-day stressors. Now we're adding a whole layer of holidays, of cooking and family activities. There might be a gingerbread house in your future, wrapping gifts, travel. We're adding a lot of stuff. And so how are we going to get this all to fit in the same 24-hour day that you've always had? I want to point that out. You're increasing the demands, but the size of your plate is, so to speak, the same. We don't want your plate to overflow. So a couple of things. One, use a calendar, task list, notebook. You can even use a project manager app, right? And I had somebody once actually chuckle when I said that. They're like, it makes it feel like my life is like so corporate to use like a project manager app. But when we talked about it, they realized they're like, that is what I need because I have so many demands, right? I have, my career demands, I have my doctor's appointments and all the lab work and the testing that I have to stay on top of, my regular screenings. And so for individuals to be mindful of how are you going to coordinate all that, it's okay. There's a handful, by the way, if you are techie and you like apps, there's a handful of apps that you can download for project management. A lot of our phones, right, come with to-do lists, and some people just like a good old-fashioned notebook. I don't care what you use, just use it. Use it. I think it helps so much when you are able to put everything that you're carrying here, the mental load, and organizing everything and really seeing it, especially with the calendar, because then you can see, wow, there are several days where I am really booked. What can I do to pace that, to kind of, spread that out? And then I would encourage you on some of the days where there aren't too many activities, go ahead and block some time for yourself and put in a pleasant activity that you enjoy, okay? Always so important to have something in your calendar that you look forward to, not just the doctor's appointments and when a bill is due, all right? And set priorities. I know oftentimes when we go into the holiday season, I'll have individuals telling me, oh, I want to do so much with the kids and the family. We're going to go ice skating and do gingerbread houses, and we're going to go to the zoo because they do a night show. We got to see Santa, but I don't like this Santa, but so-and-so likes that Santa. So we're going to go see both Santas. And I'm like, okay, this is a lot, right? Well, what happens if you can't do it all? And that's okay if you can't. I would encourage you to prioritize and be careful not to give everything a 1, because if everything's a top priority, then nothing is. And so go ahead and criticize it and be like, what am I for sure going to do, right? And what am I willing to be a little negotiable, and what would be nice if I got to it, right? And I think that kind of helps put things in perspective. You can even do that on daily tasks. I've done that with patients just in regards to what are the things that you absolutely have to do today. Like I absolutely have to get this package in the mail today, and I have to get gas in the car. Like those are deal breakers because I'm not pushing the car. And other things, it would be nice to get to the vacuuming today. But if I don't, it's not a top priority. It might be by the end of the week, right? And that's okay. And so doing it daily for some people kind of helps them organize it. Give it a try, see what works. I've had some patients really come back pleasantly surprised. Another item, remember we talked about, you don't have to do it all. You really don't. Delegate some items, right? Oftentimes, individuals have a hard time kind of delegating things on individuals. If it's a recurring item, I would encourage you to have a conversation with them and let them know, like, hey, moving forward, I can't do it all anymore. And sometimes, especially in the winter, my hands are painful and they're cold. It's hard for me to pull the garbage cans down, right? And winter is really tough on joints. I will point that out. I'm sure all of you know that with any kind of arthritis or lupus. And so being mindful of, you know what, that's going to be a chore I can delegate, to our teenager, or, I'll let someone else handle it. And so to have that conversation, so you're not reminding them weekly, right? That helps lighten also the mental load. And then, of course, like I said, pace yourself, but most importantly, be realistic. It's hard sometimes when you realize you're not bulletproof, but it's okay. Nobody is. And so for you to have a list of what you truly need to do versus what you'd like to do can be so helpful. And it's okay if you don't get to everything. It really isn't. I think the important thing is that the things you do, you're able to enjoy them and be present for them. Number 6 is practice relaxation. And so relaxation can look differently for people. I like to start by talking about mindfulness. And mindfulness is a term that was coined by John Kabat-Zinn. back in the 90s. And he defined it as the conscious awareness of the present moment without judgment. That is the exact quote. And the reason I know that is because I am mindful about reciting it, because Jon Kabat-Zinn actually developed mindfulness when he was working in a hospital with chronic pain patients. So sometimes when I'm working with my patients and we talk about mindfulness, they're like, I can't do it. It's not, mindfulness isn't for me. And I'm like, actually, it was designed for you. It was specifically designed for chronic pain patients. And he was working in a hospital. It was an inpatient unit. And he was working with patients. I think he was doing like various types of like occupational therapies and group therapies and art therapy. And he asked the doctors, can I start this like meditation with them and things like that? The doctors were like, yeah, go for it. And after a few months, the doctor started noticing several of the patients needed less pain medication and less blood pressure medication. And they realized the only thing that changed was that Jon Kabat-Zinn had started doing this mindfulness group. And so if you're really interested in this, I encourage you to take a look at it. He's got a great book called Full Catastrophe Living. There's a lot of great books and resources, and even just short articles if you're interested on mindfulness. And so it is letting your mind be essentially at the same place that your body is. Because so often we're in our head, right? We're driving and we're thinking about the grocery list. And did I call my mother-in-law? And did I email back the doctor? And don't forget the kids are overdue for their flu shots, right? You're in your head and you didn't even notice the beautiful colors of the trees and the leaves that are changing, right? Because you're so in your head. And so I encourage you to practice mindfulness. It doesn't have to be a formal 20, 30-minute meditation. Great if you can do that. And I'll talk about that in a second. But even brief moments. And so I will give you two of my favorites. I encourage you to try these for homework, okay? One is the next time you're stuck at a red light, don't get annoyed, all right? I know it's tempting, don't. Instead, use the red light as a conscious awareness of every time you see a red light to take a deep diaphragmatic breath. That's it. Be present in the moment. Look around, look at the beauty and nature around you, right? Listen to the song on the radio, right? Just for one moment, take a slow, deep breath in and out, right? It also helps the red light go by faster, right? But that's a great way because I'm not asking you to block time in your schedule because some individuals will tell me, I can't, it's really tough. And so incorporate it because now what will happen over time is every time you see a red light, you're going to have this association. Another one that I really like is hand washing because let's face it, we all wash our hands multiple times a day. 2020 was definitely a selling point for a lot of individuals to really spend those, 30 seconds there washing. And so I encourage my patients as they wash their hands, notice the smell of your soap. Notice how the water feels, the temperature, how it's running over your hands. Look at it, smell it, feel it, right? It's a very mindful activity. And it only takes 20, 30 seconds and you're not going anywhere anyways. You're just standing still. So it's a great time to go ahead and practice some mindfulness and your breathing will slow down. Shoulders hopefully will drop, right? And the more you practice it throughout the day, right, it's helpful. And the reason I'm encouraging you to do this is if you have a lot of oxygen in your bloodstream, you're lowering your baseline stress level and increasing your resiliency so that when something really stressful does happen, you're not going to be triggered nearly as much. And so that's really important. Other ways that you can practice some meditation, great activities like yoga and Tai Chi. I know for some patients, this can be really hard, but you can start really slow and gentle. There's a type of Tai Chi called Qigong that is phenomenal. And it's very slow, very gentle, and you can modify it and even do it in a chair. Lots of great resources on YouTube. I encourage you to check those out. In regards to meditation. So a lot of research shows the benefits of meditation. Truth of the matter is if you can get into a deep meditative state for at least 20 minutes, you actually release endorphins. And endorphins are your body's endogenous pain relievers or pain hormones. This is the good stuff. We want endorphins and we want a lot of it. And so getting a 20 minutes of meditation can be really tough. If you have never meditated, please don't start with 20 minutes as your goal the first day. No, I'd encourage you to start with a minute, maybe two. And you'll stay that way for a week. And then the next week you get up to like 3 to 5 minutes. And then the following week, you got to do it slowly. Otherwise, what happens is your brain is so used to, right, having racing thoughts all the time that if you try to take away all the external stimulus, it will turn on you and it just goes. And I've had people tell me, I just sat in this meditation class that I tried to take and I did nothing but over and over to myself have like scattered thoughts and then get pissed off at myself for taking this class and realizing I can't meditate. And then they just gave themselves a bunch of negative self-talk and they walked out stressed out. And I'm like, okay, that is not what we wanted. And so a great way to start that is you can try some of the apps that are out there. Two of my favorite include Headspace and Calm. If you have Kaiser, those are free. If you don't have Kaiser, that's okay. They do a free trial and a free version as well. And one of the reasons I like Headspace and Calm is it's really aimed at the beginner. So it really starts with really small, like 2-3 minute videos and audio clips. All right. And then Insight Timer is completely free and it has over like 70,000 tracks. You can find meditation specific for certain things. So like if you want a meditation to help you fall asleep, do you want a meditation to help you with chronic pain? Do a little progressive muscle relaxation. Those always feel good. You can even do things for like anger, stress, things like that. Okay. And then of course, just spending time in nature. Now we're going into winter, so I'm saying this cautiously. Spending time in nature doesn't have to be a great deal of time, but even just a few moments of sun when it is out in the winter, I encourage you walk outside when it's the warmest between noon and 4, right? Grab your mail, right? If you can, do a little walk around the block, right? Try to stay active. If you can't, maybe you just go to a park and sit on the park bench, right? And have your cup of coffee there. Just being outside in nature, fresh air, sunshine, great vitamin D. So good for you. And then the diaphragmatic breathing. So important. I wouldn't be a psychologist if I didn't tell you about diaphragmatic breathing. So what happens when we're stressed out? Remember how I told you your body goes in the sympathetic nervous system and it starts to increase the breathing. And so you are taking tight, shallow breaths and they're rapid. And you are not taking a good, proper, relaxing, deep breath. You're actually not getting a lot of oxygen. And what happens is this is actually one of the triggers of your sympathetic nervous system. And one of the best ways to trigger your body to get out of that and into parasympathetic or the relaxation is your breath. That's why breath work is so important, right? We teach it to mothers when they're delivering babies. We also have, you know, if you ever had dental work, right? As the doctor's like injecting you, they'll be like, don't forget to breathe because we hold our breath when we're in pain. And so when you do a diaphragmatic breath, it is a slow, controlled breath in. Preferably, I mean, there's a lot of schools of thoughts. Everybody's got techniques. I've heard square breathing, triangle breathing, belly breathing, diaphragmatic, abdominal breathing. There's all sorts. Truth of the matter is I want you to take a nice deep breath in slowly. I prefer the nose for individuals. And what you'll find is as you breathe in, we really want you to utilize your entire lungs. And so being able to sit upright, standing is really good. I have some patients that will do it laying down before they fall asleep, get a nice couple deep breaths. It's also sometimes helpful to put your hand on your chest and a hand on your belly and just kind of notice how your lungs go up and down and your belly goes up and down, right? Because as you breathe in and your diaphragm contracts, it's what helps pull your lungs to expand, okay? And then this is the important thing. On the exhale, I want you to do it slow and controlled, and I want you to do it longer than your inhale, okay? And there's a lot of counts. People will be like, count to 3, count to 6. There's the 4, 6, 8 count. I don't care as long as your exhale is longer than your inhale. All right. And if you ever notice, like when you're really stressed and you're really worried, I've had patients tell me, I can't get a deep breath. I'm just so anxious. I'm so stressed. I don't want them to breathe in harder. No, you know what I'll tell them? I'll be like, blow out as hard as you can, as hard as you can. And that's a lot easier. And when they blow out, what's the reflex? They then take a nice deep breath in. So there's a nice little way you can trick it. You can tell your friends. All right. And so when you breathe out, release it softly through your lips like this. And some come out of your nose as well. And that's totally fine. You want to do slow and controlled. I like a 4 count in, an 8 count out for some individuals, depending on, you know, if you are a smoker or a history of a smoker, or if you have asthma, Sometimes being stuck on a certain count can be a little hard. I've had some people tell me it feels uncomfortable. Start with just your own count, just kind of noticing and being like, oh, okay, I notice I tend to count to a 3 and a 7, whatever it is, that's fine. Okay. But it's really important when you're breathing in and you bring in more oxygen, it helps neutralize the pH of your blood. Okay. And the pH of your blood is so important because if it runs alkaline, it actually makes you more sensitive to pain. No one wants that. So taking deep breath in actually really does help with pain management, stress management, softening those muscles. Practicing gratitude. I think it's so apropos that the first major holiday coming up is Thanksgiving. And, I think it's a great reminder to be grateful for so much. And there's so much great research about gratitude. I will tell you, I know that some days it can be tough to find something to be grateful for. And so I always encourage individuals to focus on the things that are going right, because your brain will point out all the things going wrong. It's actually its job. It's trying to help you protect you of threats. But sometimes you have to consciously remind yourself of the things that go right. And I encourage people to find 3 items daily. And it can be a small item, it could be something like, I got a great parking spot. Not only was it nearby the stores I needed, but it was also in the shade, right? And that can absolutely be a great thing to be grateful for, right? Also, oftentimes individuals will tell me, you know what, I'm really grateful for a friend. I'm really grateful for someone who texted me that I hadn't heard in a while to check on me, right? And I'll tell them, did you let them know how much that meant to you? And I encourage this because we also feel good when we share that with others, right? It's reciprocated. And it actually helps us also feel good to let them know, like, you know what, I just want to let you know, you dropping by last week and surprising you with the cookies meant the world to me. I just polished off the last one. And I just wanted to say again, thank you. It meant a lot, right? You are teaching people how to treat you. You're letting them know how much you are grateful for them, how much you appreciate certain things that they do, or what they bring, or how they support you, or thank you for sending me that meme. It made me laugh the other day, right? It's okay to do that. And then additionally, some individuals will use a diary or a journal. And I get a lot of individuals will tell me it's hard to journal. I don't like typing. Fine motor movement is painful, especially on joints. And if you have inflammation. It doesn't have to be a lot. It doesn't have to be a long, letter. And I think for some individuals who are, and they love, language and writing, great. What a great outlet. I get a lot of individuals who will be like, no, and I don't have a lot of time. And so I might tell them, just do bullet point journaling. That has become really popular in the last 5-10 years. And that's just little notes to yourself of, I'm really grateful for this. I'm grateful that surprise bill turned out to be a complete error. It's not even meant for me. All sorts of things. And so I think that's really helpful. Exercise. Okay. So exercise can be challenging when you are already living with chronic pain and fatigue. However, some things to keep in mind is exercise does not have to be CrossFit for an hour, 5 times a week. Okay. Exercise looks differently for different people. And I just want to encourage you to incorporate it into your life and to prioritize it. And it could be something as simple as sitting at the kitchen table with TheraBands that you got in physical therapy. I just want you to make time for yourself and do it regularly. And I want you to pace your activity. If you used to be physically active and since getting sick, you haven't been so active, I don't encourage you to jump back in head first. That is not going to land well. What I want you to do is pace your activity. And what they have found is that when individuals will slowly increase their activity level, no more than 5 to 10% a week, they do really well. And so if you're slowly trying to get back into, say, like walking, right? Maybe you start with walking around the block once when you get the mail. Slowly increase that before you start doing a 5-mile hike, okay? Because I'd rather you do slowly and notice how your body responds than pushing yourself too far and then having a big pain flare and then setting you back and then mentally just feeling let down. Okay. So the other thing to keep in mind is, you hear all the time from doctors, well, how much exercise should I be getting? Well, the research does show 20 to 30 minutes of a cardio 3 times a week is really ideal. And actually, if you can get to this, you also are more likely to release some endorphins. Again, those pain relieving hormones. Now, Exercise does not always have to be at the gym. I want to point that out, especially with the holidays, right? Walking around Costco counts. Steps are steps. I don't care where you get them. Okay. So give yourself credit for those things. Household activities, cleaning, right? Vacuuming, wiping the counters, folding laundry. This is all physical activity. And if you don't believe me, I encourage you to keep your phone in your pocket or maybe a little Fitbit or a watch or whatever device and take a look and you'll notice, oh, wow, look at that. My heart rate did get up a little bit. The key thing here for cardio, even if you don't have any of these devices and you're just like, I don't know if I got into a cardio zone. I feel like I may have walked a little too slowly. The best way to know whether or not you're doing cardio is when you go for a walk with someone, if you're having conversation and it's a tiny bit labored, you're in the sweet spot. That's cardio. If you can barely have a conversation, you are walking too fast, you need to slow down a little bit, okay? So I just want to point that out. Cardio looks different for everybody, and that's okay. Let's pay attention to that self-talk. So we all have a voice in our head, and that is totally normal as long as it is your own, okay? And that voice loves to criticize and critique and just gives you a running dialogue all the time. I don't know about you, but mine, she is busy. She won't keep quiet some days. Want to be careful about what they have to say. And oftentimes our brains will criticize us and give us some negative self-talk, like, I can't believe, you couldn't make all the Christmas cookies, right? And you ordered the Christmas cards late and it's criticizing you and you're a failure and you just can't keep it together anymore. What's wrong with you, right? You want to challenge that negative talk because you are listening. Your body is always listening to what you have to say. I don't even let my children, and I have 9-year-old twins, I don't even let them have negative self-talk. If they had a bad day at school and they had a rough test, and I remember once my son was like, oh, I'm a failure. And I was like, whoa, don't talk about my son that way. And he's like, but Mom, I'm talking about me. And I'm like, I don't like that you're insulting. No, your body's listening. And he looked at me a little confused. I'm sure having a psychologist for a mom is confusing sometimes. But we had this conversation about, I had a bad day. It was a rough exam. I'm going to study tonight. I'll do better next time. And he did. Having positive self-talk or neutral self-talk actually increases the odds of a positive outcome. Okay. The other thing too is I'm not asking you to replace your negative thoughts with positive ones because sometimes you can't. Sometimes horrible, tragic things happen and they are gut-wrenching. And it's okay to tell yourself, I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to get through this moment and I'm going to try again tomorrow. And there's no way to sugarcoat it because the world isn't filled with glitter-filled unicorns. And that's all right. But for you to focus on the things that do go right, trying to stay neutral, not adding catastrophic or fueling the fire of negative self-talk. I want you to talk to yourself the way you would your best friend. If you wouldn't say it out loud to your best friend, be mindful not to say it to you, okay? I've often had people ask me, because I love to crack a good joke. I love to have a sense of humor. And they've asked me, is it true laughter is the best medicine? And my answer is, it depends on how funny your doctor is. The truth of the matter is keeping a sense of humor is so important. Many people actually do it unconsciously. It's a self-defense mechanism for comic relief. And it does indeed produce endorphins. Again, those feel-good hormones that we love. The Mayo Clinic was also doing some research, and they were talking about how it enhances your intake of oxygen, helps with blood flow, stimulates your heart, lungs, muscles, lots of good stuff, right? Have you ever laughed so hard you've seen an old friend that you haven't seen in a while, and then later on you realize, oh, my cheeks are sore, or my side is sore, I laughed so good. That's a lovely feeling. But something else to keep in mind is there's some early research coming out that shows that laughter decreases artery inflammation and increases the good cholesterol, all right? That does not mean you can laugh your way to a Big Mac, okay? I just want to be clear, right? I still want you to eat healthy, right? Eat certain foods in moderation. But what I do want you to be mindful of is that laughter is important. And it's tough sometimes to keep a sense of humor, but I encourage you to be around things that make you laugh. So being mindful of You know, do you watch a comedian that you like? You know, do you watch funny movies? Do you keep yourself around friends and family that have a good sense of humor, right? That is definitely helpful. And then just two more. I also wanted to point out that we should be mindful of stimulants. You know, I'm giving you a lot of tools that you can do, but I also want to be mindful of a tool we don't heavily rely on. Now, I am not going to be a complete hypocrite because I do love my cup of coffee, but I want you to be mindful of how much stimulants you're having. And the most common stimulants that we see tend to be, right, caffeine. So that's in a lot of coffees, a lot of teas. Most coffee shops have very few decaf or caffeine-free items, just so you're aware. Most of their teas have some level of caffeine. And then, of course, nicotine. Alcohol is also a stimulant. People don't think about it because they think, oh, it's a depressant, right? Alcohol initially, when you take it, will slow down your breathing and your heart rate. But because it has sugar, alcohol breaks down into sugar, it is also then a stimulant and crashes. Okay, so keep that in mind. And also some medications and some drugs also have it. And I know prednisone is one of the 4 FDA approved medications for lupus, and that can be a stimulant. So be mindful of what time you take it, right? I'll have patients sometimes tell me, oh, I forgot, and I ended up taking it later in the day, and my sleep is going to be ruined. Try to set up alarms, okay? Happens to the best of us. We'll try to set up some alarms, try to keep that so it doesn't disrupt, you know, your sleep and other factors of your life. But also be mindful if you're taking certain medications for migraines, even over-the-counter medications for migraines. They have a lot of caffeine. And so if you're doing that and doing a Starbucks run, right, might want to be cautious. I don't want you to fuel a fire. Your nervous system is already activated. I don't want to give it a stimulant and activate it even more. So switching to decaf, herbal teas, making sure that even though it's herbal, it also says caffeine-free. Easy switches around this time of year, right? You know, non-alcoholic apple ciders, hot chocolates, all sorts of good stuff that you can do. And those can actually have a calming effect, right? Like chamomile tea in lieu of a stimulating effect. And then last but not least, if you are really struggling, and maybe it's not just around the holidays, right? There's a lot on your plate and you're going through a lot. It's okay to connect with a mental health provider. There are a lot of great resources. The Lupus Foundation of Northern California hosts so many phenomenal support groups and be a buddy mentors and all sorts of great resources. There's also chronic pain groups. There's a lot of things. I encourage you to talk to your healthcare team about finding some resources. Oftentimes, your primary care physician can be a great source to get you started, depending on your insurance and your coverage, help direct you to various providers or clinics. I often get asked, you know, what are some resources that I, you know, commonly use for my patients? If you're looking for psychotherapy or a psychiatrist, Psychology Today is probably our biggest search engine in the mental health field. I know so many therapists in private practice that will use that or even work with hospitals. They use Psychology Today. Many of them do not take insurance, but will give you a super bill that you can then apply towards your insurance. So that's worth having a conversation. And then lastly, 211. You can call 211 from any phone. It will connect you to your local county operator, or you can go to the website 211.com and then it will ask you what county you live in. It will connect you to over 70,000 nonprofits in the state of California. And this includes medical clinics, mental health resources, but also things like food banks and paralegal advice and women's shelters. And it's a great resource. So I encourage individuals to check that out if you need some more guidance or support. Okay. And that is it for me. Thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate it. I'm not sure if we have any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Goozee. Uh, Now we will open the Q&A portion of this event. We will begin with the questions that were asked during the presentation, but feel free to ask additional questions in the chat.
Looks like somebody made a comment that they wanted to say thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you. It's a
Sarah.
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
While we're waiting for people, sometimes they're a little shy. Do you have any questions that usually come up?
Great. Yeah, great question. Something that comes up is probably weather related, right? For us, the holidays come around winter, right? On this side of the hemisphere. And so just navigating that. And so I do encourage my patients, just to be mindful of that, because whenever we have a low pressure system coming in, it changes atmospheric pressure, and that changes everywhere, and not just in the weather, but also in our joints. We have pockets of gas in our joints, which is why if you watch some of those old Western movies, you'll hear somebody say things like, I can feel a storm brewing, right? You really can. You're probably more accurate at that time than a meteorologist was. And so that being said, I always encourage my patients some things that can help is sometimes doing a little bit of gentle stretching or exercise, especially after a warm bath or a warm shower can help. Softens your muscles, helps regulate your body temperature, makes it a little easier to do a little movement. Checking out YouTube, lots of good resources. I think a lot of people know Sit and Be Fit. That's really popular in KQED. It is still around. And there's some really great YouTube content. I usually encourage individuals, look for individuals who have like a medical degree. There's a lot of physical therapists and acupuncturists that will do things like that. I know that sometimes the Lupus Foundation has also had, movement activities and things like that we've encouraged. And so check out some of those, start slow and gentle, but that's so important around the holidays. And then lastly, the lack of sunlight is tough. So what I do encourage individuals as we get closer, right, to winter solstice here in December, is in the morning, open up your curtains, let in as much light as you can, soak up what little vitamin D you can, right? Try to get outside during that peak sunshine time. And then in the evenings, try to keep some light on until you're about 2 to 3 hours away from your bedtime. Much like a canary, we are sensitive to our sunlight. And when it gets a little too dark, we start to get a little sleepy. And I've had people get their sleep patterns thrown off, as I know we all experienced last week. So
yeah, definitely. Great.